All right, boys and girls, today we're going to do an OSPF lab. Let's just go with the lab. Let me give you the name of the lab. It's OSPF Lab 22. So I'll stop sharing the video so we can focus in the lab. Once you download the lab, you can start doing the configuration. But first, let's go to the instructions. Let me go ahead and find the lab, the other PDF version that I have there, so we can read the instructions. All right, so the first thing we have to do is, these are the tasks. IP connectivity between the three routers is configured. OSPF adjacency must be established. Configure router 1 and router 2 router IDs using the interface IP addresses from the link that is shared between them. Configure router 2 links with a max value facing R1 and R3. R2 must be the DR. R1 and 2 links facing R2 must remain with the default OSPF configuration for DR election. Verify that configuration after clearing the OSPF process. Using a host while mask, configure all three routers to advertise their respective loopback networks. Configure the link between R1 and R3 to disable their ability to add other OSPF routers. So let me just close this mouse for now and we can start working on this. So first thing we do, we have to configure the OSPF in router 1. So let's go to router 1. Let's start adding the configuration. How do we know which routes we need to configure? We can actually do the following. We can do enable show IP interface brief, and you can see all of the routes that we need to start configuring. Some of them might still be there. So show IP protocols, maybe there is some configuration already there. So there are already pre-configured OSPF routers 10.10.12.0 and 10.10.13.0 with OSPF process 1. So we just need to do another one and add the router ID. The 10.10.12.1 is actually the interface, one of the interfaces in router 1. If we go to router 1, we see 10.10.12.1 is gigabit 00 in the router 1. So that is basically the router ID as well. Config T. Before adding the configuration, we already read the instructions, right? That's something that we did. So we should be all good regarding the instructions of this lab. These are all of the tasks that we need to configure step by step, a total of 4 tasks. Let's start with router 1. First thing we do, interface gigabit 0/1, IP, OSPF, network point-to-point. That is one of the tasks that we need to configure between router 2 and router 3, the option of network point-to-point. How do we know it's router 3? Because Ethernet, in this case, will be the gigabit 01, and 01 is the connection between router 1 and router 3. Now, let's go with the next step. After doing the exit, we do router OSPF 1, router -ID 10.10.12.1. Okay, we are going to do the clear IP OSPF process later on. For now, let's do a network 192.168.1.1.000 all zeros, and then area 0. That one is still missing. That is probably the loopback in, it's actually the loopback 1 in router 1, where we are at this moment. We're going to do an end and then do the clear IP OSPF process. Then we select yes, and we are right. We have successfully saved the changes and configuration of OSPF in router 1. Nice work. Now, let's go to router 2 so we can start doing some changes there. Okay, we validated we were in router 1, right? Yes, we saved the configurations and everything. Let's go to router 2. I keep closing the tabs because we don't have to confuse them. But in the exam, if you want to keep the tabs open, you can do so. But remember to be careful to configure the commands in the correct router. So let's start working along with router 2. The first thing we do, interface, gigabit 00, IP OSPF, priority 255. That is the interface that goes from router 2 to router 1. That is the first step we do, configure the default priority that goes from router 2 to router 1. The second thing we do is we access the interface gigabit 02 and we execute the same command as before, IP OSPF priority 255, and we do an exit here. Router OSPF 1. Network is actually router ID. Router ID. That will be 10, that 10, that 12, that 2. Actually, that is the interface. If we do a do show IP interface brief, you can see is the gigabit 00 of router 2. That is the one that we are configuring for the router ID of router 2. Now, the next command will be router. After doing the exit, we do router OSPF 1, and then router dash ID. We already did that, but let's just do it again just to cover a box. Is do that 10.2, 12.2, 10.10, 12.2. And after doing that command, in order for that command to take effect, we have to do the clear IP OSPF process that we're going to do at the end. After configuring the router ID, we do the network command. 192.168.2.2. That is the loopback IP address for router 2. 000 all zeros, area 0. And clear IP OSPF process. And then let me just do a yes here. Nice. Right is what we need to do to save the changes, and we are good with router 2. We configured the default priority with the command IP OSPF priority 255 in gigabit 00 and 02. Those are going to send traffic to router 1 and router 3. Now we are only missing the configuration in router 3. So let's go to router 3. Carefully, we access router 3. We make sure we are in router 3. How do we validate? We can use show version command, for example, to validate, or actually show run command to validate we are actually in router 3. This is the host name of router 3. And in fact, it's already configured. The router name is router 3 here. So we already know we are in the correct router. But if you want to run a further validation, you can do the show run command to validate all of the configuration in the equipment. This is with real equipment and packet tracer. I'm not sure if this command will be available in the exam because sometimes they block some of the commands. So please be informed about that. Config T. Interface gigabit 0/1. This is the interface that goes from router 3 to router 1, and we have to do the point-to-point configuration. What is the correct command for this? IP, OSPF, network, point-to-point, and we have successfully configured IP, OSPF, network, point-to-point from router 2 to router 3 to router 1. Now we do the exit. Router OSPF 1, network 192.168.3.0, all zeros, and then area 0. That is the loopback IP address that we have here in router 3. Then we have to do the end. And we do clear IP OSPF process. Yes. And after doing the write, we should be all good. Let me do a show IP OSPF neighbors to see if the neighbors are coming right back up. And in this case, you can see the neighbors configured correctly in router 3. You can see the neighbor there. It's 10.10, the 13.1, which is the 10.10, the 13.1, one of those routers, either router 1 and router 2. Let me just run the command one more time and let's see. Okay, so it's router 1 and router 2. Those are the neighbors. You can see through the interface. 10.10.23.2 is the connection that goes to router 2, and 10.10.13.1 is the connection that goes to router 1. We have successfully completed this lab and validated that we are able to recognize the neighbors. If we want to do an additional validation, we can go to router 1 and run the same command. We can do show IP Ospf neighbors. I cannot guarantee that this command will be available in the exam, but you can give it a try. And hopefully with that, you will be able to confirm and validate this lab, and everything was completed successfully. So I hope that you have found this useful. Please remember to practice, because practice makes perfect. And I'll see you around, boys and girls. Take care.